Okay, welcome, dear Summits participants, to another very interesting session we offer you within our Summits Virtual Institute. And I'm very happy to introduce you to a very famous doctor, psychiatrist, and therapist in Switzerland. She is Dr. Ursula Davatz. And she has over, I would say, 3-4 decades of experience dealing with teenagers. And as you know, that we basically work out programs, better alternatives for teenagers in all the education system. We thought that it's worthwhile to listen to Mrs. Davatz, and she will explain what happens in the age of 15 to 20 years when you become an adult, and what does this mean for education. And we are very happy that she accepted to give a talk and also to answer to questions. Here we have Katie Caves, which you know very well, as well as Ladina Raguet. She is a postdoc in our chair, and also she is a mother, and therefore she may be also interesting in knowing more about what's going on in the adolescence age. Therefore, I would like to hand over the floor to Ursula Davatz, and we look very forward to learn from you. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much for inviting me. For my introduction, I'm a psychiatrist and a family therapist. I have been trained in the United States for 3 years in family therapy by one of the most famous originator of family therapy. Yes, I have been working with adolescents for over 40 years, so I think I know a little bit about them. The theme is teenage phase or adolescence. Adolescence is a very important developmental phase during which a lot of changes take place in life of these young individuals and also in their brain. I first relate to the brain. The brain goes through a synaptic pruning, one calls it, which means a cleansing of unnecessary synaptic junctions according to the principle, what you don't use, you will lose. A baby brain has many more connections, and which is a disturbing situation. While when you become an adult, you have to organize your brain, or your brain gets organized. And it gets organized to the principle, what fires together, wires together. That means the brain matures, it solidifies in its function in order to be more efficient. So unimportant things get blocked or thrown out, and important wiring, high roads, I could say, get solidified. Socially speaking, the brain, socially speaking, this phase of adolescence is the development of the personality, of the individual personality formation. In psychological terms, one calls this individuation. It is a very important psychic development. You develop your personality, and the personality is made of your genes and what you experience. Now, the inherited part of your personality is quite a lot determined by genetic factors. And this is always a discussion, nature versus nurture. Nature would be the genes, and nurture would be the environment. And both of them have equal importance, and it's not one or the other. But in psychiatry, this has been discussed a lot. What is more important? My conclusion is both are equally important. What is determined by our genes is, for example, the temperament, sensitivity, intellectual capacities, and emotional reactivity. of course, to the color of your hair, etc., etc. But I only talk about the psychological determinants. In the teenage phase, this genetic determination, your temperament, your genetically determined personality gets into intense interaction with the social environment. And this intense interaction with the social environment can turn into a fight, into a competition, and of which teachers and of course parents are an important part. Because teachers at that moment are important, I say now, primary significant figures in the relationship with these teenagers. And sometimes when the parents are not functioning anymore, the teenagers rely on their teachers. And that's why all the teachers are very important for these teenagers during their teenage phase. If the teachers or equally the parents don't respect basic genetic, the basic genetic makeup of their youngsters they have in front of them, they cannot teach anymore, because it's a relationship that plays an important role. We always say you don't learn for the teacher, but the teacher is a very important factor in the learning process. If the teachers and the parents, of course, don't understand the basic personality makeup of these teenagers, they are absolutely incapable to teach these youngsters anything anymore. And they get into a vicious fight with them, a power struggle, which the adults usually lose. And that's not worth it. If the adults win a fight, they risk to damage the personality of these youngsters. The youngsters might adapt for a certain time, but they go back to their own personality, and one so-called breaks their personality. And what happens at that moment, if we adults break the personality of the youngsters, they develop psychiatric illnesses. They get sick and they develop all kinds of psychiatric illnesses. In fact, this is a fact. Most psychiatric illnesses take their start during adolescence. Maybe not the full-blown psychiatric illness, but the start. And now I relate to a special personality type, because with that special personality type, one can demonstrate this fight even better. And that's the personality type of ADHD or ADD. And at this point, ADHD and ADD still figures in the DSM-5 as an illness, as a psychiatric diagnosis. But I say it's not a psychiatric diagnosis, it's only a personality type, but a particularly vulnerable personality type. And that personality type can be sort of described by its high sensitivity and its impulsivity. And the high sensitivity makes that they are much more sensitive to mishandling or wrong handling of them in that phase. If their social environment is not competent enough to handle these vulnerable teenagers according to their needs, then, as I said before, they may develop all kinds of illnesses. They may develop psychiatric illnesses, but also physical illnesses. At that moment, when they develop illnesses, they're being passed on to the medical model. But what the medical model does, the medical system, the medical system, according to the medical model, tries to treat them with psychopharmacology and tries to make them into normotypes. and they are not normotypes. If one tries to make normotypes out of them, they lose their personality, their creativity, and their special talents. And they go against their own original personality, which of course is a pity and is, yeah, very bad. They might become better performance for some time, and might be more efficient in our intellectual efficiency-driven world, but they are sort of trained into a normotype and lose many of their talents. Here is a but. And now I come in with a biological knowledge. It is a biological knowledge among scientists that heterogeneous or inhomogeneous populations survive much better than homogeneous ones. This relates to the genetics. And I say now, by trying to make these teenagers into normotypes, if one tries to make normotypes out of these special teenagers, such as the teenagers with ADHD and ADD, but you can also take other teenagers, society loses a lot of creative potentials, which these creative potentials, they might be useful in solving problems in the future. Since these kind of people, they can think out of the box. And Einstein is one of these samples. He went to the same gymnasium, to the same school I went to in Aarau, and he was not so good in languages. So he had bad grades, and one almost threw him out of the school, the gymnasium, and because he had bad grades in languages. But finally one decided to keep him, and now one is very proud of him, of course, and the school is called Einstein House. That's only one example. One could bring many more examples. But what I want to stress is, and that's my conclusion to all the teachers and all the parents, in case you as a teacher get stuck with one of these difficult, stubborn teenagers, don't try to win the power fight. Rather stay with them in contact, learn from them, and try to get them to do anything but something of their own. Because if they can do something of their own, if they can identify with what they're doing, then they can develop their personality. And if push comes to shove, I say the personality development is much more important than the acquisition of knowledge out of books or computers, because all the knowledge you can still get later on, while if the personality is damaged, you're lost and you will have a problem throughout your life. So think of the personality. And there we can even go to Socrates. A good teacher is always learning from his students and not just the students learning from them. But in order to have this creative process between these youngsters and the teachers or the parents, you have to relate to them. You have to feel them. You have to understand them. You have to stay in contact with them. So the relationship is the most important thing if things go wrong. And then they can go through difficult phases, and all the rest they can pick up later. That's my basic message to you. And now you can ask me questions.
Thank you very much, Ursula, for that wonderful introduction. And I have to say, I think I did my coming out within one of our summits units before. I always say I was, when I was 15-year-old, this type of, I would say, stubborn young girl. And I had enough of school at that time, and I was just big, you know, I would experience what's going on out there in the world. And I told to my parents, look, I don't want to go anymore to school. I want to know how money works. I want to go to a bank. That's my dream. And I have a supportive parents, because they were very supportive with regard to, let's do a vocational education training in a bank. That's okay for you. We love vocational education training, because one of my parents did also start their career with a vocational education training. But I always said that for me, it was not the teacher. For me, it was these people in the bank, you know, these adults who were giving me very good advice. You know, you will make your life because of this and that. So I will ask a question with the relation. If the environment is important for such teenager, would you agree that exposing people at the very early stage to this adult world, I mean, to the companies where you have this work-based learning environment, could that be for, I would say, half of the cohort an advantage because they have different role models and may get some advice from other adults?
Yes, I think the interchange with adults who are serious and well-meaning and present their conviction and ideology, this is very important. And not just one adult, but several adults. But the adults shouldn't shove the knowledge down the throat of the teenager, but just present it. And if the teenagers can exchange with such adults who give positive support, give their ideas, their attitude, etc., that's very important. With such a stubborn teenager, it's most important that we don't try to convince them of anything. We should just present it, and then they can take it when they're ready for it. Yeah, I think they are very important, these adult figures around these teenagers. But they have to have the right attitude.
Yeah, and can I add here that I think, especially with regard to vocational education and training, this brings me also to the conclusion how important the trainers are there.
Yes.
And that they probably also need to have some psychological basic knowledge to know how to cope with these young people.
Yes, I think it's helpful. Some teachers are natural talents and they can just relate to these youngsters, and they do it right because they have a good gut feeling, they can relate, they react to the teenagers. Others get sort of rigid and they don't want to lose in the power fight. And I think one shouldn't get into a power fight. One should only relate and then be creative, find new ways. And I have supported several teachers of teenagers, I've given them coaching, and we have found out different ways of handling these teenagers. Creativity is very important at that moment. But if one gets stuck in a power fight, then one sort of loses one's own image, and one doesn't want to lose that. One feels ashamed. And sometimes they need help. And they should go for coaching so they get that help. They shouldn't feel ashamed to get help. But when I was giving lectures to teachers, my introductory phrase was always, never teach a teacher. And with the helpers, we helpers, doctors and nurses, I say never help a helper, because we are the ones who want to help. And the teachers are the ones who want to know. But it's important for the teachers that they get some enlargement of their view.
Yes, I understand that. And I think I see a lot of similarities with the upbringing of small children.
Yeah, there is a saying.
And even then, I think you try, as you said, you try to not win the power fight and understand them and like guide them.
Yes.
But it's just difficult sometimes, even if you try to. I think you need to, or it's good to have some basic knowledge about how their brain works.
That's right. That's right.
That's probably the same for the adolescents, I guess.
Yeah, one can say that. One even says at the age of 3, 4, it's a stubborn phase, and one compares it to teenage phase.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, you're right. One should get a little bit into the brain of the little child. I just have an example. I have my grandchild with me, and he likes to cook and bake. So we were opening nuts, and I wanted to put the nuts into a little bucket, as one does it. But he got the cooking form out of the cupboard and wanted to put these nuts into there. And I thought, wow, that's far too big, etc. But I let him do it. And at the end, he put that form into the oven. And he said, I make a cake now. And then I only understood why he took that cooking form. It was very interesting. So yeah, we should learn even from the kids how they think and not just intervene right away, because then we destroy their motivation. They have their own motivation according to their own brain. And if we come in too far, we just mitigate them, we limit them, and we don't let them develop their own personality. But that's right. It's difficult sometimes, and especially if one is in a hurry and one wants to achieve something, then that, one shortens all the processes, and the kids, they play more, and the teenagers also want to experience more, to learn.
Mm-hmm.
It's not always easy. We have to reflect ourselves.
And I can imagine that's especially difficult in working life, where
absolutely,
where you want them to be productive in some way.
Everything goes towards productivity. But sometimes it's worthwhile to take a little longer and then have more creativity, and afterwards more productivity. And yeah, all these famous people like Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, etc., they were all stubborn and developed their own thing, and these were new things, and society can benefit from that.
You've been talking a lot about creativity, and you just mentioned stubbornness and relationships. And one thing that we talk about a lot is soft skills, all of that whole category of
soft skills.
Yeah, and teamwork and all of that. And we know from research that young people learn soft skills better at work than they do at school. For example, you learn a lot more about teamwork when you're working with someone who's older than you, someone with a different education, than you do with 5 people your same age who you've known since you were 6. Is there a psychological backing to that? Is there something about the workplace that helps young people develop those skills?
Yes. Well, I think, if they are in school, they have only one adult person and all the rest are peers. And the peers tick more the same. The peers are important. But of course, if they are in the working world, they have many different adults with adult personality development, and that's much more interesting. And so many students who go to gymnasium or upper grade, they don't find the stuff they have to learn at school absolutely, they don't find it interesting. While if they can relate to other adults, creating something which is being used and not just theoretical, that motivates them much more to learn. Yeah, I think that's an important point. Yeah.
The motivation is actually, that was already my next question. I'm American, and we don't have any kind of apprenticeship options.
Yeah.
And one of the things that everyone says in high school all the time is, when am I ever going to use this? Why am I learning this?
Yeah.
You know, you're sitting there in calculus, like, well, I have to do this for college, but I don't know, you know, or any class. For me, it was chemistry. And that seems like that really affects a lot of students, especially the ones who are not planning to go to college, to go to university. For them, it's hugely demotivating because they're sitting there knowing that they don't need to learn what they're learning.
Yeah.
It seems to me like having apprenticeship creates an opportunity for students to really apply what they're learning and be motivated by that. You have experience in both the US and in Switzerland. Do you see that really helping young people stay motivated?
Yes, I do think so, because these young people, they want to do something, they want to learn something which they can use, and not all these theoretical things, all this intellectual stuff. I think it's very helpful. I had to give a course once in ABB, and they said they formed teams out of elderly people, middle age, and the youngsters. And they integrated the apprentice much more in the production process. If the teenager can see what's coming out of it, he is much more motivated. And Piaget, who was a biologist, but had many theories, he also said one should always have a team with a senior person, with a middle age, and a youngster. And they working together, they come out with the best results, because the youngster can still jump borders. The middle-aged person is very experienced in reality, and the older person is wise. So this kind of combination is very helpful. Yeah. And the teenager feels integrated.
So, if you would give advice to parents, but also maybe to education reform leaders, if I listen to you, then I would say, especially in the teenager age, 15 to 20, the first priority should be that you help the young person to develop their personality, and that they get their self-esteem, that they can live and create their own life. And not, to some extent, I always think it's an adult attitude. My child have to go to the high school first, and then, you know, the parents have some plans for the kids. But if you underestimate how difficult it is that the person can develop personality. And then if I listen to you, I mean, if they don't see any necessity to learn a certain subject, that is for me not really helpful to develop the personality. So could you explain what can happen if you really force young people to an adult dream? My child needs to go to a college or a university, and then you push the kid into a high school or a gymnasium, but obviously he suffers in a sense that they don't like it. What is then the effect on the personality if they do that?
I think if you push them and they do it out of obedience, then you dwarf their personality. And if I get these people later on in middle age, they haven't really developed their personality. I think one really dwarfs them. Of course, they have to learn skills, but these skills have to be applied and they have to fit with their personality. And whenever I have a person in therapy, I always look for their interests, for their very special interest, and not just for what one should do, not for the normal type, but it just doesn't work because one dwarfs them. And as I said before, they might get sick. And I have many of them in therapy. And once they're 50 or even older, it's difficult to go back, and you can never keep up with that personality development. Yeah, I think one can dwarf them and one can even make them sick. And maybe I add here, Google has had a study and they were trying to find out how does a good, well-functioning team work. And of course, one wants many intellectuals, many clever people with a high IQ, and they run many algorithms through these groups, but they finally found out a very simple thing. If the members in a team, if they can have equal speaking time, so each personality has the equal speaking time, and if they can read with the soft skills where the other person is, can feel the other person, then they function well. And this is again heterogeneous groups work much better than homogeneous ones. They survive better because we need of everything. We don't just need these intellectual hyper flyers.
Yeah, we need all. We need all to.
Yeah, yeah. And each of them has different skills, and they have to learn together. Did I answer your question?
Absolutely. Okay. I think Vladina has another one.
Okay. Yes. So one of the drawbacks that's often mentioned in connection to the Swiss education system is that the adolescents have to take decisions very early in life. I mean, our system is quite permeable. There's still a lot of possibilities for mobility later on, but still with 15, they have to take a very important decision. So what do you think? Are adolescents ready at that time to take that decision, or how is it related to the development of their personality? Or
yeah, that's a good question. Some are ready. Some are very focused on their own thing, and one should let them do. Others are more dreamy and they don't know yet. And yes, that's right. They go to high school because they don't know yet what to do. And those, I let them do that, because then it's not helpful if one pushes them into a trade, into a special profession. And even if they get out of school and they don't want to go to high school, but they still don't know what, then I say you could go for a year to England. In Switzerland, that was in fashion. The girls always went to Westschweiz, to the French-speaking part. Boys usually don't do that, but they could have a practical year with a farmer or with anything. So they have time for their personality to form, and then maybe they find out what they want. They could also try several things. One shouldn't push them too fast. Mm-hmm. Parents are usually impatient. You have to know what you want. But if the child doesn't know, and if the child had no space to make his or her own decision, that child, that adolescent, that youngster needs some space for oneself, probably away from home, to find out what he or she wants. Mm-hmm. There it's worth to wait.
Mm-hmm. So
gain time.
Do you have some experience with career counseling, how that helped them? Or if I understand you correctly, you would even say that they need more time instead of counseling.
Yes, sometimes one should
guidance. Yeah, okay.
Yet. Career counseling is a good thing. I sent many for career counseling, but it depends on the counselor. If the counselor is very efficient oriented, early on, maybe 50 years ago, they said, there we need people. Why don't you go into that job? That's not the right counseling. Mm-hmm. One really should counsel according to the personality. And if the personality is not formed yet, one has to wait. One can, in the career counseling, they always make tests, aptitude tests, intelligence tests, etc. One can say you're good in that and that and that, and this you're not so good. And then the person can think about it again. One shouldn't push them. One should help them to find out. And I often do career counseling with 30-year-old or even older, trying to help them to find really their job, their motivation, their intense, how would I say, inclination, where they want to go. And I also tell them, don't take a job just to make money. Mm-hmm. choose the job which suits your personality. Because usually it doesn't work. Some people can just work all life in a job, but they don't like it, but they just can do it. But those who I see, they can. They just get sick. They get a new job, and they always drop out of it again. So it's worth it to take a little bit more time to find your own thing.
Mm-hmm.
Sort of in line with the career guidance topic, and that people, and there need to be certain, you know, young people need time and they need options where they can delay a year if they need to, and they need guidance. If you were setting up a new system, most of our countries that we're working with, they either don't really have a system, or it's very small, or it needs to change a lot. So if you were designing a program for young people where they would be going to the workplace, what protections or rules or training would you put in place for them? For example, training for the trainers to make sure that they know how to deal with young people in the adolescence sort of phase, or any requirements that they get, not just the rules and regulations, but also they learn something about creativity, or what would you do to help make sure that young people are successful when they go to the workplace?
I think if young people start right away in a job, in a workplace, I think these youngsters should always have a tutor. One person should be designed or defined to take care of that youngster as a tutor. Otherwise, I think one just throws them into a pond and they have to swim. And some can swim, but others, those who are quite sensitive, they get lost. So, and not the entire team can take care of them. I guess one designed person should be the coach, the tutor, and take care of them. I think that's very important.
Related to that question, which I fully support what you have said. I mean, if there is no instructor, it's very difficult to organize the onboarding process so that the young person is successful, you know, starts to understand, I'm really a member now of that companies. But what I always hear two things. If I'm in Switzerland, all this instructor or the HR person who is dealing with the apprentices, they told me, well, look, after three months, we see that this young person, he changes the attitude from a child up to an adult. It's very quick. This change is very quick. And if I listen to other reform leaders from around the world, they say, no, I mean, these are kids, they are 15-year-old. How can they, you know, go to a company and be successful? That will never work. And the company depend on really prepared people. So it's a kind of a trade-off. I would say it's a hen and egg problem. If you don't get the chance, and if you don't trust in young people that they, as you said, you know, that they have they're on the way to develop their personality. Maybe they are a little bit more shy to explain what they want to be. But in my view, and I experienced that myself with 15 years, you may have some problems in the very first week, you know, because all are adults. But as soon as you get the feeling that you are accepted and that people are proud to have you in the team, you change your attitude. Has this to do with what the young person is looking for? And maybe in other countries, it's just the stigma of older people that kids never can do something. So how can we help other countries to understand that they do something good if they are more risk takers to expose young people to those workplaces?
Mm-hmm. I think you have to differentiate into extroverted personalities. And the extroverted personality makes it fast and can probably adjust fast. The introverted, shy personality gets lost. And I think, but they might still have a lot of talents. So I think if you have a youngster who leans more towards the introverted person and the shy person, one has to take care of them. And they have to have somebody who relates to them and guides them a little bit and protects them when they get stuck or lost or pressured. The extroverted personality type, I guess those youngsters can adapt quite fast. But of course, if they misbehave and if they can't control their impulses, then they get into trouble again. And then one should have somebody who supports them. I had a young lady, a youngster, and she was in an apprenticeship for Kaufau. And somehow her boss treated her in a way that she got hurt. She was extroverted, but she got hurt. And she said, I gave up my apprenticeship, finished. I never got back to work. And the mother sent her to me, and I discussed the entire situation with her. I gave her advice how she should go back to her boss and say, when you said such and such, that hurt me very much, and that doesn't motivate me. And I almost gave up my apprentice. And she did, and her boss reacted well. And he said, thank you very much. I didn't realize that I hurt you so much. And then she continued her relationship, her apprenticeship, and she's still a good working woman. So at that moment, she needed the support. Now her mother knew me, so she sent her to me. But in other situations, they don't have this kind of supervision or coaching at hand. So that's why it would be good if there's something in the institution, in the company, who takes care of these teenagers and is well, looks out for these mishaps, is aware of these things, because it's not routine.
Okay.
Another question?
I have one that's kind of the opposite of what we've been discussing. It's sort of the flip side. Sometimes when we're talking about designing apprenticeships and workplace learning opportunities, there's a very big focus on mentors and mentorship and what we've just been talking about. But in a situation where there's no structure. So in Switzerland, it's, you know, a formal education thing. Lots of people do it. There's, you're going to school, there's a curriculum, you're getting a certificate at the end. And if something, you know, if something goes wrong, you can talk to the canton. There's a lot of processes and structures around it. Mm-hmm. But sometimes on one extreme end, you see trying to set up a program where it's essentially an internship with a mentor. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times it's like for high school students over the summer, focused on students at risk who've never been in a workplace before. And sometimes I have trouble articulating, obviously we can talk about the systems and all of that and how it's important to have incentives and a curriculum and be part of the formal education system. But it's hard for me to articulate why that might be dangerous for the student, because it seems like maybe there's not enough around them, even with a really good mentor. What do you think about that? Is a really good mentor enough? What are the risks? What are the benefits? What happens if we just have the mentor?
I'm not sure if I understood you well, but I think, or right, correctly, I think if one goes too much into the direction of everybody wants to help that person, and you have a mentor, you have a therapist, you have a social worker, and I don't know what around, then, and they all talk onto that one individual, then that's no good at all. It has to be one person, of course, a person who can relate to the youngster, and the rest has to be structured. You're right, there has to be structure, because if there's structure the youngster can relate to and understand, he or she can learn to go according to that structure. If there's no structure around, that's very bad. That's very confusing. And if there are only helpers around, that's terrible. And this is what we get in psychiatry. So we have a youngster who drops out of something, difficulties with parents, and then many other people are involved. And again, just had a case recently, and that young boy said, it's only me who can make my career. I don't want any help. But they all were trying hard to helping, and everybody according to his own or her own model, her way of thinking. And then you can only disturb the youngsters. And this is as soon as you get into the psychiatric field, then yeah, it's only disturbing. Just one who accompanies, and the rest should be an orderly structure.
That's helpful. That does address a big part of the question. And then I have one last question. I don't know, okay. Ursula and Ladina, how many more you have? Okay. Internships. Yes. So another really common approach to introducing workplace learning is to send regular high school students to like a 6-week summer internship. There's no particular task, no curriculum, just sort of experience. From a psychological and developmental perspective, how is that different than having an apprenticeship? Like how are those different? We know from a structural point of view, but for the student, how is that different?
I went for an internship to the United States as a doctor when I was still a medical student. And we were integrated in the structure. We still had to make calls, et cetera, et cetera. So it's not a real internship. I think in an apprenticeship, if you are an apprentice, you are integrated into the structure. And this is good because you understand what the structure is and you are useful. While only making an internship, as you said before, you're just drifting around. If you are a curious and again, extroverted student, that is okay. If you are shy, then you get lost. So again, you have to differentiate between these two personalities. And if it's a shy person who goes for an internship, I think that person should have assigned a tutor. If it's extroverted, you can let him run. I think. Does that make sense?
A lot of these kind of internships, they just offer so-called shadow education to the
okay.
And I sometimes I criticize that because the kid then just have to follow an adult person to see what they are doing. But in my view and with my experience, there should be at least once a day an activity where that young person is doing something so that they really see I could contribute to that company's work. Because otherwise, I think there is a similar effect that they just don't see why they should go there because they are not useful in a sense that they see at the end of the day what they have really done for the company. Do you agree with that?
Yes,
or do you
I agree. I think that's right.
Maybe there
you
are
can
other
be a
aspects
shadow
which we underestimate
education person maybe for 2 weeks, but not much longer, because otherwise you lose interest and you want
Is that just me or was that everyone?
Okay, I think it's not good if you have a shadow education for more than a month or 2 weeks. For 2 weeks, you can be a shadow person. And I absolutely agree that the youngster should experience some usefulness at least once per day or once a week. But again, there are people who like to observe, and they make their own conclusions in their mind, like research people. They probably could do that for a longer period of time. They would research the entire system and plug it into their mind. But those people, those youngsters who want to be active, they should be able to be included into the working process and not just follow the professionals.
Mm-hmm. I'd like to come back to, with my last question, to one of the very important lessons learned I had from today's meeting with you. It's teacher or parents or adults who are fighting with a young person, a teenager, should never try to win that fight because of damaging the personality. And obviously this is easy said, but and we can understand it. However, if you as a parent or a teacher or an instructor in a company are involved in such a conflict, there you have to be trained in order, you know, to quickly react professionally.
Mm-hmm.
So I know that you give a lot of, I mean, you teach teacher, you teach, you are dealing with parents, you are a mentor of teachers. What could you describe some steps how these adults can start to understand what is the best behavior in such a situation?
Maybe I might say that if a youngster is impolite, aggressive, or withdraws, I always say to the parents, and I can say that to the teachers too, whatever that youngster does is not a qualification, although he uses qualification. It's not a quality talk like you have at work. So you have to step back 2 steps or 1 step back. He doesn't qualify you. He just expresses his frustration, his dissatisfaction, whatever, his emotions. It's the emotions of the youngster. Step back, don't take it as a quality talk. What would I say otherwise? And then try to get together into a discussion again. Try to get into a process again. So whenever I have parents and the youngsters and we are stuck in a solution, and you can gain time and you can say, we have a problem here together and I don't know how to solve it. Just admit that you have a problem. And then I always ask the youngsters first, what is your suggestion? How could we solve that problem? So you go on eye to eye, we have a problem, not you have a problem or I have a problem, we have a problem. And the we says we should find a way out of it. And then ask the youngsters what his suggestion is. And then, yeah, in my respect, I think one should address this too, etc., etc. Get into a process of interaction and problem solving. Not power fight, but problem solving together. And I think as soon as the youngster realizes you have a problem too, he gets more adaptive and empathetic and wants to help you. So you learn together, you go together, and both of them come out of it without losing their face. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. So you accept that the young person as an equal partner in the discussion.
Absolutely, yes.
Give the impression that we can learn together, yes. And we find together a solution. It's even better for both because both of us will be satisfied.
Yeah, yeah.
Cool. So thank you so much, Ursula, for that wonderful session. It helps a lot, and I think we will have a lot of participants who do agree with us that this age is a difficult age, and yes. we always have to be open and to learn more how to deal with that, and to try to accept that if a young person is not really going your way, it doesn't really mean that it's the wrong way. It just means that the person is developing their own personality and goes another way. And this is what I think we sometimes underestimate, especially in this very busy time where we think we don't have time to talk and to solve problems. But it's even then, it takes you much longer way if you don't respect that.
Absolutely.
So that's it. Thank you very much. We close here the session, but for our participants, we will open a discussion forum. So please enter then questions if you have any questions, and we try to get back to Ursula too. If we cannot answer that to you, we try to go back to Ursula to look for any answers. So that's it. Thank you very much, and I wish you a wonderful day.
Thank you too. Same to you.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.